Thunderbolts has some of the best action scenes in the entire MCU. It completely changed how Marvel does action. We went from this to this. They didn't need the biggest budget in the entire multiverse saga, and they didn't throw in characters with crazy powers either. The only ones with flashy abilities are Ghost and Sentry, but the Thunderbolts crew still managed to pull off some awesome action scenes, doing pretty much the opposite of what Marvel and most superhero movies had been doing. Instead of locking the actors into a set full of green screens like they do in all the Avengers movies, or making CGI dolls like in some scenes from Born Again, they took inspiration from the best action movies of the past few years to give us a real experience. You can see that in the very first scene of the film. Yelena jumps off the terrace of a super tall building, opens a parachute midair, and lands on the neighboring building to complete a mission Valentina gave her. It looks like a simple scene we've seen a million times, but it's executed with great skill. The whole sequence is incredibly intense, because director Jake Schreier went for an extended long shot. I'd love to play the whole thing, but sadly, I have to cut it all over the place so I don't get hit with copyright and have the video taken down. But in the original scene, there's a 70-second shot with no cuts at all. That's something you almost never see in superhero movies, which usually have more cuts than Victor's ass.
Cut.
In Thunderbolts, the camera pulls back from Yelena so we can actually feel how high up she is. You can see the mountains and the rest of the city in the background, and they all look like little toys. If you're scared of heights, you probably felt a little dizzy, and it gets even worse when Yelena jumps. This part only has one cut, just to give us a better look at the fall, and show how small Yelena is compared to the building. This scene is 100% real. The crew shot it on the rooftop of the Merdeka 118, the second tallest building in the world. They traveled all the way to Malaysia, and Florence Pugh had to actually jump for real in an incredibly dangerous stunt. The only stuff they fixed in post-production was the color grading and removing the wires holding the actress. Everything else is real. And I know what you're thinking, that none of this matters, because they could have just done the same thing with Florence Pugh in front of a blue screen. It would have been safer, no need to travel, and the end result would have looked the same. Actually, Disney said no when Schreier pitched the scene. They thought the jump was way too dangerous. But doing it for real has a bunch of advantages. There's no way they could have pulled off a long take like this with Florence Pugh stuck on a set, because it would have been obvious the background was fake. The longer a shot goes on, the easier it is to spot stuff that's off, like the depth, the lighting, or the colors. Even if you've never seen the behind the scenes, you just feel when a scene looks faker than me uploading daily videos. You don't have to be a post-production pro to see that the background in this scene looks fake. Same thing happens in tons of shots from the Quantum Realm and Quantumania. Since the VFX team didn't have enough time to finish stuff in post, the end result looks fake. Thunderbolts would have ended up the same. The only way to make scenes like this look perfect without shooting on location is if you have years of post-production and $400 million, like Avatar 2. But Thunderbolts had a $180 million budget, and Disney rushed it like they do with pretty much all MCU projects. Sometimes you notice it more, sometimes less, but this scene would have been impossible to pull off if they hadn't done it for real. They took inspiration from the insane stunts in Mission Impossible. They even shared the behind the scenes of the jump so people would see how much effort the crew put in. It's just like what Paramount does with Tom Cruise's newest movies. And this building explosion was real too. Michael Bay must be so proud. And it gets even better. Right after the jump scene, we see Yelena sneaking into the next building and going up against a bunch of security guys. Since she's not carrying any guns, she's got to move way faster than everyone else to dodge bullets and use other guards as shields. The attention to detail here is amazing. If you watch the scene in slow motion, you'll see she uses her Black Widow stingers to take down some of the guards. They even managed to develop her character through the action. During the whole shot, Yelena keeps moving away from the light and into the right side of the frame, which is completely in shadow. She's embracing her darker side, and even the shadows stretch to the right. The same thing happens later on, when the Void sends the people of New York into his dark dimension.
It's so deep.
But the key thing is, this is another long take. It goes on for 30 seconds straight, with zero shaky cam. Because of that, they had to nail the choreography. Just like with fake CGI backgrounds, if the choreography is not solid in a scene like this, it totally pulls you out of the movie. Gotta give it up for Heidi Moneymaker, Alex Beowulf, George Cottle, Can Aiden, and the whole fight and stunt team for putting in so much attention to detail. Even though the scene's pretty dark, and this pirated copy I'm using makes it look even darker, you can still tell exactly what's going on the whole time. It helps that Yelena's blonde, and her outfit's lighter than her enemies, but all the moves are choreographed perfectly to feel like a real fight. You can follow any character through the whole scene, and you won't see any guards just standing around, waiting for Yelena to finish her moves. That's what happens when the choreography's bad. But that's not the case here. Also, they didn't stick the camera too close to the actors, so you could actually see the hits. I know some of you are gonna come for me for saying this, but Christopher Nolan used used that same trick in his Batman trilogy. I love those movies, but during most of the fights you can barely see anything, and the characters are just punching at air half the time.
Didn't you notice?
We should have seen scenes like this in Black Widow, Hawkeye, or Moon Knight, but hey, it's nice that Jake Schreier took inspiration from the action in John Wick. Those movies also use long takes with really tight choreography. Sure, Thunderbolts doesn't have any gun fu, since Yelena doesn't use firearms, but the action feels similar. And yeah, I know this isn't the first time we've seen something like this in a superhero project. The hallway scene from Daredevil follows the same formula. What's different is how they place the camera and how it tracks the character. And the fight with the Deadpool Corps is also one long take where we can follow each character and see all their moves. But Daredevil and Deadpool and Wolverine all came out after John Wick. So if anything, Thunderbolts was inspired by John Wick. I'm not including Shang-Chi, even though the choreography there is also awesome, because all the fights are packed with CGI. And honestly, I don't think the effects have aged that well. That's not a problem in Thunderbolts, because this entire fight is 100% real. Same goes for the desert chase scene and Bucky's entrance. The explosions are real, and they flipped all those cars for real. But what about the fight in the vault? Yelena's second mission is to clear out one of Valentina's vaults, but she didn't count on how sneaky her boss was. Turns out Elaine betrayed her and sent her there to die along with some other loose ends. The director used this scene to show the Thunderbolts fighting each other, and to make it clear that they all have different powers and skills. That was pretty tricky, because ever since they announced the team members, everyone was saying the same thing, that it didn't make sense to put so many characters on the same team who basically do the same stuff. But this scene shut all of us up. But wait, there had to be CGI here, no way around it. Ghost powers just aren't doable with practical effects. As far as I know, no one can actually walk through walls. So this scene relies a bit more on post-production because they didn't have another choice. But the fight still sticks to all the same rules I mentioned earlier. The shots are a little shorter so we can see the hits from each character's perspective and get that sense of speed. But the choreography is still awesome. And they didn't just shake the camera all over the place to fake the chaos.
Thank you.
The most important thing is that each of the Thunderbolts moves in their own unique way. Walker's the slowest and heaviest, since he's the only guy in the room, at least until Bob shows up. And he's got a cheap knockoff of Captain America's shield. But because he's got the super soldier serum, he's also the strongest. He mostly uses his fists and always goes straight at his opponents, because he knows he can block bullets with the shield and overpower anyone with brute force. Yelena can't do that, since she doesn't have any enhanced strength, so she relies on grappling moves and sneaking up from behind. She uses Walker's weight against him, but she ends up on the ground a lot, because that guy can knock her down with just one hit. And since she doesn't have a shield or the ability to phase through walls like Ghost, she has to hide behind a desk to avoid getting shot. Taskmaster is the most versatile, using a shield, sword, and bow and arrow, and Ghost is just popping in and out all over the place thanks to her phase-shifting powers. This could have been just another copy-paste fight scene from a generic action movie, but they actually used each character's traits to make it a fun and interesting battle. The best part is when Yelena throws a knife at Ghost while hiding behind a desk to dodge Walker's shots. But Ghost catches the knife and throws it at Taskmaster, who blocks it with her shield. The knife bounces off and nearly hits Walker, who grabs it mid-air and tries to stab Yelena with it. It's just a 5-second moment, but it perfectly shows the chaos of the fight and how your own weapons can end up being used against you. Yelena almost gets taken out by her own knife.
Ironic.
That's great, but what about the Sentry scene? In the second act, the Thunderbolts face off against Sentry at the old Avengers Tower. This scene definitely leans heavy on visual effects. If you watch some shots in slow motion, you'll notice the CG isn't as polished as in Avatar 2. It's not as subtle as the vault scene, where Ghost was the only one with weird powers. The main focus is Sentry, and sometimes he's clearly touched up with CG, but the effects are solid enough that they don't pull you out of the moment. And it's not like you can recreate superhuman speed with practical effects. At least not yet. But this is your classic superhero movie scene, right? There's a guy who moves at super speed, flies, and uses telekinesis. Everyone jumps him at once, but it's totally useless, and Sentry just throws them around like ragdolls. It's clearly made to show that he's one of the most powerful characters in the MCU. But even if it doesn't look like it at first, this fight still sticks to the same fundamentals as the others I told you about, just with a lot more CGI.
Is that so?
Each character has their own unique way of going at Sentry, but none of them can even mess up his perfect hair. There's a clear homage to the Matrix, and Lewis Pullman always stands completely upright to give off that vibe of superiority, like he's not even breaking a sweat. To him, the Thunderbolts are just like mosquitoes. But the best part is they still kept the long takes. The Thunderbolts' full-on attack on Sentry lasts 40 seconds in a single shot. There are no cuts at all, and the camera stays locked on Sentry the whole time. Instead of cutting cutting every time he hits a team member to show them crashing to the ground, the camera follows Bob, so we can see his smug face after taking down each of the Thunderbolts. We only see them all laid out on the floor when the fight is over, and there's no shaky cam in this scene either. If you focus on any one character, you'll notice the choreography is actually really solid, even if they were looking at a green screen part of the time. Unfortunately, Marvel didn't release any behind-the-scenes footage for this fight, since they wanted to keep it a surprise until the day of release. But you don't need to have worked in post-production on Thunderbolts to spot that they definitely used CGI models, at least a couple of times. There's just no way they did this all with practical effects, unless they strapped a harness on Lewis Pullman and actually shattered all of Florence Pugh's stunt double's bones.
Only a tiny bit sadistic.
But thanks to how well the fight is planned out, the fake parts don't stand out. Plus, they mixed in the CGI models with real shots, using real actors interacting on a real set. It's kind of like what Peter Jackson did in Lord of the Rings. Instead of building the whole scene in a computer, they combined CGI with actual footage to get the best possible result. And they did this again in the third act. When they're trapped in the Void, Yelena has to make her way through a lab to reach Bob. But the Void knows the bond between them is too strong. That's not in his best interest, so he destroys the whole imaginary setting to keep Yelena from getting to Bob. Obviously, the crew didn't actually break the floor or start throwing stuff at Florence Pugh at that speed. They'd risk ruining her beautiful face. Most likely, they used a bunch of wires again, and her stunt double probably did most of these moves. But once again, they mixed real jumps with a set that got destroyed in post-production. It would have been way easier to just toss in a CGI model like the ones from The Flash and call it a day. But the scene hits way harder because you're watching a real person jumping around. It's a shame that the team behind The Flash didn't go for the same kind of creative approach as the people behind Thunderbolts. That's one of the reasons that movie flopped. I explained the other ones in this video.
Crap, mega crap.